Welcome back to the Philly Film Room podcast. Today is going to be a solo episode as Eric is going to be unavailable for a couple weeks. But having said that, we still want to bring you some content and discuss the preseason game that is upon us. I just want to get to a quick programming note. We have been going through the different position groups, and we actually recorded the offensive line and quarterback position previews, but there were some audio issues on my end for both episodes, so we're going to re-record at least a quarterback episode and put that out. We don't want to leave you hanging there, but we're going to wait for Eric to get back to put those out. Now, having said that, with the preseason game upon us, we want to go through and kind of discuss what we're going to be paying attention to. Again, this is preseason, so there's not going to be a whole lot to take away schematically in terms of the X's and O's that we see from the offense and from the defense. But really looking at some of the position battles and highlighting some specific players is really what we're looking for at this point in time during the season. So I'm going to go through position by position just to break down what I'm going to be paying attention to. So first up, we're going to be talking about the quarterbacks. Now, I'm under the impression that, if the starters play, it's only going to be for a series or two. So really, if Jalen ends up playing, I'm really just looking for them to be operationally efficient, making sure we're getting the play calls in and out, making sure guys are getting lined up. I'm not really looking for a bunch of splash plays. It's probably going to be a bunch of core run plays, core pass plays, quick pass plays, maybe a play action here or there. But I'm not expecting anything too crazy. More importantly is the battle for the quarterback 2 position. It seems Tanner McKee has been getting more and more quarterback 2 reps as the week has gone on. Now, I presume they're giving McKee more reps so that we can see him with better players. It really is hard to fully evaluate a quarterback if they're running with a bunch of third and fourth string receivers. Just the timing, being in the right spot. A lot of that stuff can look bad on the quarterback if he's playing with players around him that aren't elevating his play. So, him playing more with the 2s, I think is more of an indication of the coaches want to see a little bit, how does he perform with some better players around him. I personally think Kenny Pickett is going to be the guy that ends up winning the quarterback 2 job. I don't think it's really going to be that close of a competition, but could be proven wrong. We do need to see how these guys perform in the preseason. I do think snap count is going to be a good indication if it is a real quarterback 2 battle. Is it going to be close to even split, or does McKee take more reps? If McKee takes significantly more reps than Pickett, then to me that's an indication that Pickett really has the stranglehold on the quarterback 2 battle, but we shall see. In terms of performance, things I'll be looking for specifically out of Kenny Pickett, he had some accuracy issues last year. He missed a lot of throws high. He would sail throws all over the field, way above his receivers or his tight end's head. A lot of that came down to mechanics. So have his mechanics been fixed? Is he going to be a little bit more accurate? I thought he was actually a pretty good decision maker, getting the ball out of his hands quickly, working through his progressions, whether that's reading the front side of the progression, then resetting and getting to the back side of the progression. I thought he was more than serviceable in that area. It's just that accuracy issues really started to take hold. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a quarterback guru and know all about the mechanics. Really, I want to see we'll see if that is fixed through the end results of him being more accurate, being more on target with his throws during the preseason. On to running backs. People have we've gotten some Kenny Gainwell fatigue, and I think that's led people to just think that Will Shipley's going to come in and take the job. I don't really see that being the case. I think the running back 1 and running back 2 jobs are safely locked up, with Saquon clearly as a RB1 and Gainwell going to be the RB2. The reason for that is due to Will Shipley and his pass protection, and as well as his ball security. So those are concerns of mine. If you saw the video I did breaking down Will Shipley and comparing him to Kenny Gainwell and what I thought might happen in the RB2 battle, it's kind of how I thought it would play out, is that, Will can make some plays as a receiver of the backfield and running the ball, but it's going to be his pass pro that holds him back. And so far, based on the beat reporters' notes after each practice, it seems that pass pro is still an issue for Will Shipley, and I'm not entirely sure it's going to be an issue that gets resolved in the season. I expect his technique to get a little bit better, but more importantly, I think he needs to add play strength. and just become an overall just a little bit bigger and stronger player, uh, just to hold up against linebackers. Because from what I've read, is there's been a few plays where linebackers have just run right through him, and that's similar to what we saw out of him in college. So I'm going to be really paying attention to Will Shipley in the game, and not so much how he's running the ball. I think he has very good vision and feel as a runner, but how is he in pass pro? And then also, how is his ball security? He was very loose with the football when he was playing in college. I'd really like to see and hope that he has better ball security when he gets to the NFL, really covering up the ball well. He would really just dangle it out a lot in college, so that does need to get fixed. If he cannot help keep Jalen upright, and if he cannot hold on to the ball, he's not going to play. So I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing how Shipley develops over the preseason in that regard. But having said that, I don't know how much Will Shipley is going to play. If he is considered to be a guy that's going to have a role for this team during the season, I don't expect him to be getting the majority of the snaps in the preseason. Now, if he does take a large share of the snaps in this game, then maybe that's an indication that he's a little bit further behind in the RB2 battle than we suspected. But I'm really going to be looking for these end of the roster running backs. Can anyone push for the RB4 role on this team? You know, there's three guys vying for that role: Ty Davis Price, Kendall Milton, and Lou Nichols. Seems that Ty Davis Price is the leader in that regard. If they do keep a fourth running back, just through reports from the beat writers during camp, I haven't seen any of this. Obviously, I'm not at practice to see, so really these preseason games is going to be where I'm able to evaluate these guys. But it seems like Ty Davis Price is the leader, though he has been having some drop issues during camp. Kendall Milton, he had a lot of hype coming into camp, but there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about him in camp. Although I will say he's not a guy that's really fit to wow in a training camp atmosphere because, number one, he's not a great receiving back, so I don't expect him to be making a lot of plays, catching the ball in the backfield. But also, his game really thrives on his physicality. You're not really doing too many live tackle periods in training camp. So where he's really going to shine is in preseason games. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Kendall Milton can transition to the NFL game and bring that physicality to this Eagles rushing attack. And then last we have Lou Nichols. I haven't heard too much about him. Mainly what I have seen is that he hasn't been great in pass pro. So that's not a good look if you're going to make the team as an RB4 as a rotation back for the Eagles. So, but we'll see what happens with the running backs during this game. Whoever is the carry leader in the first game, I think is probably the guy that's most in line to be that RB4, and I'm guessing it's probably Ty Davis Price, but that's still to be determined. Now, moving on to wide receivers, obviously AJ and Devontae are the cream of the crop here. I don't imagine they're going to play, and if they do play, I hope it's one series at most. Listen, we don't need to see these guys in the preseason, but we should get our first look at Johnny Wilson as wide receiver 3. Not to mention, Britton Covey should be, or not to be overlooked, Britton Covey should get some work as rotating in as a wide receiver 3 as well. Johnny Wilson's been getting a lot of reps with the ones this training camp. Now, is that a case of him benefiting from the situation? You know, you look at the lack of depth at the position overall. We kind of highlighted wide receiver 3 might be a weak point for this offense. It seems that that's looking like that might be the case again. But he's also benefiting from injuries to some players ahead of him, such as Paris Campbell, who probably would have been the wide receiver 3. But he's been injured over the past few practices, and now that's really allowed Johnny Wilson to shine. On top of that, you've had other guys that haven't stepped up, notably Anais Smith, as he has been dealing with a lot of drops. We'll get to that in a minute. John Ross as well has not really made much of an impact. And is that surprising? The guy hasn't played in a football game since 2021, and it wasn't due to injuries. So I'm not all that surprised that John Ross hasn't really stood out so far at this point in camp. Joseph Ngata, he hasn't really shown out either. So there's not really anyone that's pushing Johnny Wilson, but there's not really anyone that's been able to stay healthy ahead of him as well. Again, I say that because Johnny Wilson is the third receiver, it appears right now. I haven't seen too many reports about splash plays from Johnny Wilson during camp. It just seems that Johnny Wilson might be there more so due to circumstance than anything, but this will be our first chance to see if he has some ability that can translate to the NFL. I love his size. He wasn't a great separator in college. He also dealt with drop issues as well. So we'll see how that plays out, and we'll get our first real chance to evaluate him against other NFL players. Again, extended look from Britton Covey. I don't expect him to be a guy that's ever going to be a flashy player, but more a right spot at the right time kind of player. Can he maintain or really bring his show that he can do that on a consistent basis? I'll be paying attention to that. But really, does anyone else stand out at the position? Joseph Ngata, can he be a physical outside X receiver so that they can move A.J. Brown into the slot and you can still line someone up outside? My guess is that's probably going to be Johnny Wilson this year. John Ross, can he make any splash plays in this game to show that that speed is worth having on the field, even if he lacks in other areas? Most importantly from John Ross, when he is targeted, I just hope to see no drops. His drop rate was ridiculous when he did get to have extended playing time. So hopefully we see a splash play or two from John Ross, and then just no mental errors such as drops. And then Ainias Smith, can he get some of his confidence back? He was not a guy on film who had drop issues over the past 2 seasons. He did have some drop issues earlier in his college career. It looks like that has come back to become an issue right now. Is this an issue where, he's just lacking some confidence? Is he behind the 8 ball because he missed OTAs due to shin injury? That could be definitely part of the issues going on, especially if you have your first time in the NFL, you're trying to get down the NFL playbook, trying to remember all the coaching points that you've been taught over the past several weeks. And then it just can slow you down and not allow you to play free. You're overthinking too much, you're pressing too much, and then you start dropping the football, or you start not running your route in the proper way, to the proper depth, being on the same page with the quarterback. A lot of that stuff can kind of conflict, especially if you're a rookie and your head's spinning. So I hope that's really what the issue is with Ainias Smith, because when you go back and watch him, especially his final year at Texas A&M, catching the ball was not an issue. He had 1 drop on the year, and this is with him having to make some very, very tough catches in traffic while taking big hits. So hopefully he can bounce back. And if he has a good game in this preseason game, maybe get some of that confidence back, he can play more freely, and we get to see him really stepping up as well. But now, jumping to tight end, it seems like Grant Calcaterra seems like the clear-cut tight end 2. If that is the case, we should expect just a handful of snaps from him, maybe no more than a series or 2. But outside of him, who can stand out and take the tight end 3 job? When we were going through our tight end previews coming into the season, Eric and I both were excited about CJ Uzoma and Albert O. I guess neither has really been standing out during camp for the time being. So can either of them make some plays to kind of get the momentum rolling in their favor? Uzoma, I didn't really expect him to be much of a pass catcher. I really thought he was going to come in and be more of a run blocker and help in pass protection as well. And that still may be the case. It's just kind of hard, especially during training camp, to kind of stand out as a blocker. Most of the buzz that you're going to hear from reporters is going to be for tight ends making catches, making plays that they can tangibly see, as opposed to having to stare and watch the tight end during run plays. Usually the focus goes more towards the offensive line and the running back at that point in time. Preseason games is really where Uzoma is going to have to show his value to show that he can make this team as a role player, as that blocker. And I do expect him to probably be the tight end 3 when all is said and done. What I'm most surprised about, and at this point in time, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, is Albert O not standing out. And it's crazy to watch him on film and see the athlete that he is. You can see him. He's a better separator than Grant Calcaterra has shown on film. But I think it's just more that Grant is probably a better, more well-rounded tight end. The thing with Albert O is he can fight the ball sometimes. He never had ridiculously high drop rates for the position, but catching the ball hasn't been his strong suit. And if you're a receiving tight end, who isn't the most reliable catcher, that's going to be an issue. That can really hold you back right there. And I think we all know that his blocking issues have definitely prevented him from playing more. You kind of have to game plan around him when he is out on the field in terms of what type of runs you're going to call, what type of do you try and get him out and use him in RPOs instead of putting him and making him an end line blocker. So he does provide some issues in that regard. But if Calcaterra, again, when I go back and watch film from 2023 and some of the 2022 film, I didn't see that Calcaterra was necessarily standing out in any one specific area. I think he's just probably a more reliable player. And especially as a tight end too, you're probably getting 20-ish targets throughout the year. It's going to be important that you just make the plays that are there and available for you. You're not getting a bunch of plays that are schemed open for you. You're probably going to be the third, fourth, fifth option in the progression. So if that's the case, you don't want a guy like Albert O out there who's you're not sure is going to be reliable when it comes to catching the ball. So I'm guessing, that plus probably being a more well-rounded blocker. Again, even though I didn't think he was some, blocking savant on tape over the past 2 years, all of that together probably puts Calcaterra as the better player than Albert O. But in this game, can Albert O make a splash play? Can he show that explosive ability that he brings to the game is worth putting on the field as a tight end 2 or potentially tight end 3? So we'll see about that as well. Now, jumping to offensive line, we have a true battle for right guard. It appears that Becton is pulling ahead just through training camp practice reports, who's been getting more work with the first team after Steen went down for injury. I don't think this battle is anywhere close to being over. Steen was getting all the work until he got injured. As soon as he got injured, Becton came in, and now Steen has been the second guard. Is that just the team trying to work Steen back slowly? Or are they just trying to get a different look with Becton being the right guard for a week or so, and then going from there? I think snap counts could be a big indication on how the team views these two players right now. If it's an equal share, then we know it's going to be a true battle. But if there's a big discrepancy, such as Becton playing a handful of snaps and Steen gets 30, 40 snaps, well, then I think that lets you know right there that they're probably more in favor of Becton over Steen. But overall, I just want to see how these guys look playing inside, especially Becton. We haven't seen him play inside. We saw some plays from him in the open practice, just different video clips put online from people in the stands. Didn't look great in one-on-ones. There was another play in the team period where he got tossed by Jalen Carter. But there was also some other plays where he opened up significant holes on the ground. I expect him to be a dominating force in the run game. And I kind of think that's why Stout has started to put him with the first team unit, is he sees the potential of this run game when you put the size of Becton on that line that was already one of the biggest lines in the NFL to begin with. This can really open up a lot of massive holes in the run game. Is he mobile enough in pass pro, though? That was one of his biggest issues. And when he was playing at tackle, is that he was pretty slow-footed. I don't know if the injuries kind of took their toll on him over the years and he lost a little bit of his athleticism, but changing direction, getting to his set point and his pass sets, he was just a little slow getting there. He got beat outside a lot. And then when you look at the one-on-one he had against Jalen Carter, where he was just cleanly beaten inside, it almost looked like they were going half speed just because of how quickly Jalen Carter was able to beat him inside. Now, again, I'm fully of the belief that Jalen Carter has breakout potential written all over him. Dark horse defensive player of the year candidate. But you do want to see a little bit better showing from Becton in that regard. And we'll see how that, continues to develop as he's learning this new position, because he is playing a new position. This is all foreign to him at this point in time. Steen, I do want to see how he looks. How has his technique evolved over the past year? It was hard to get a true evaluation on him from the one game that he got to play last year against the Cowboys. because his technique was all over the place. It just wasn't very good, and it's hard to get a true judge on what he has to offer when his technique was so bad. There were a handful of plays where his technique was good and he looked good in those plays. Good change of direction ability. He had a strong anchor. There was a couple plays where he definitely created some vertical displacement along the line of scrimmage in the run game. But how has he evolved with his technique over time? Has the year under at Stoutland University really benefited him? And can he kind of get some of that momentum back to recapture that right guard one position going into the rest of the camp? So definitely going to be paying attention to that. Also, who is the backup center? Is it Dylan McMahon? Is it Matt Hennessy? The Eagles have brought in some other players during camp as well. Who is going to be the backup center? There hasn't been much talk about who is taking hold of that job. So I want to see who are the best performers on tape coming out of this game at backup center. And can anyone else stand out? The Eagles have been kind of rotating a bunch of different players at the guard spots throughout summer. I don't think they're truly set on who their backup guards, at least behind the Steen and Becton combo. I don't know if they know who their potential 8th and 9th best offensive linemen are going to be at this point in time. So really going to be looking for all paying attention to all these backups, seeing who stands out, and I guess importantly, who doesn't stand out. Because if your name's getting called during the game at offensive line, you're probably making some bad plays. So pay attention to these backup especially interior offensive linemen. Now, moving on to defense, at interior defensive line, I'm going to be paying most attention to the snap counts for Moro Ojomo and Marlon Tuipulatu. The snap counts for these guys can indicate where they're really standing in regards to their roster spots. Now, if you've been following the podcast, I'm definitely a big Ojomo fan. I think he's locked in to be that defensive tackle 4. I think Tui is probably 5th. So we'll see how they really stand out in regards to the roster spot. If they're playing a ton of snaps, and I think that means their positions are a little bit more up in the air, but I feel like they're gonna kind of put these guys under bubble wrap a little bit. I think we know that the leaders at defensive tackle are Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams, but you're still going to be rotating these guys in terms of Ojomo and Tuipulatu. So they're going to play roles this season. I don't know if they really want to expose their depth to risk for injury. So I don't think they're going to play a ton, but that's still something we need to monitor. But not to be overlooked, can anyone else stand out to make a push to unseat Ojomo or Tui? Or can anyone make a case just to be a 6th interior defensive lineman on the team? I'm thinking they're probably going to keep 5 interior defensive linemen, but can anyone really stand out to make it a 6th? Gabe Hall had a lot of hype coming in as a UDFA. Can he make some plays that forces the coaches to think about keeping him on the team? Thomas Booker, I think a 3rd year, going into his 3rd year, he's made a few flash plays during camp, so he may be a player that pushes for a roster spot. The Eagles do need a backup nose tackle. There's really no one outside of Jordan Davis who you kind of pencil in as a nose tackle. Jalen Carter is probably our 2nd biggest interior defensive lineman, but you don't want to waste his talents battling at nose tackle throughout the year. You want his impact to be made rushing over guards where he can get more one-on-one opportunities. So what I'm going to be paying attention to as well is PJ Mustipher. Can he make some plays? Can he stand out? Can he earn a roster spot? I think he probably, out of all the names we've listed, has the best opportunity to make the roster because the Eagles do need a backup nose tackle. I'm not saying he necessarily will be the best defensive tackle on the team in terms of Gabe Hall, Thomas Booker, or PJ Mustipher. But if there's a role he can fill that those other guys can't fill, then I think he has a little bit easier path to making the team. Having said that, like I said, I do expect the Eagles to keep 5 interior defensive linemen. Just looking at early versions of the 53-man roster. Moving on to edge, I am definitely interested to see Nolan Smith's snap counts. I think a low snap count could indicate the Eagles expect him to play much more this coming season. But if he's playing a lot of snaps in the first preseason game, then to me, that's going to be an indication that they feel he needs to get more reps. He needs to get more work to kind of develop and round out his game. If he was just going to be the clear cut, he's going to get the third most snaps at edge, then I don't think they want to risk him playing too much. But again, there's a lot that we need to see from Nolan to see improvement in his game to say that he is going to take over that role of being the third edge rusher. I do want to see how his pass rush game plan looks this year. Has he improved on that? Has he made any more strides in that area? I just thought his game plan was lacking last year. Just a ton of like either no real pass rush move where you just kind of run down the middle of the guy, or you throw this long arm bull rush, which doesn't really fit well into his skill set. I'd like to see more speed rushes, more ways to attack the edge and try and get around the corner. Use Euro steps to set himself up, stutter steps to set himself up as well. I'd like to see how his pass rush game plan has developed over the offseason. Jalix Hunt, I'm excited to see how he looks against NFL caliber opponents. Going through and watching the tape on him, it's kind of hard to get a true read on him coming out of college because he's playing against some guys that are never going to even sniff the NFL. How does he look against NFL caliber opponents? Definitely interested about that. Now, Fangio had a quote about him looking different when the pads went on. It's quite a damning quote, saying that he pretty much, there's a difference between playing down at Cornell and Houston Baptist to playing in the NFL. I didn't think that was the greatest thing to hear in terms of his development, but again, we expected him to be a guy that didn't necessarily push for a ton of playing time this early on. But still, I'd like to see how he looks. How does his strength hold up going against NFL players? As a guy that kind of grew into a defensive end as opposed to being a bigger player his entire life, I think the strength does take a little bit of time to catch up. So I'd like to see how does he match up against NFL offensive linemen in terms of strength. Like Nolan Smith, how does this pass rush game plan look? Does he have any go-to moves? Does he have a semblance of you have your fastball and then your changeup to throw off of that? How is that going to look? And then Patrick Johnson, he was praised by Sirianni during camp. He provides special teams experience, and there's word of him looking improved during training camp, just playing the position in general. Can he push for more playing time, especially with the Eagles needing some depth at the position? Can he come in and show that he can provide some value to this team, whether that's rushing the passer or being someone that can be stout against the run, because the Eagles are definitely looking for that at the position. Moving on to linebacker, I don't expect Zach Bond to play much. I personally think he's running away as the clear-cut best linebacker on the team. Now, that's from limited exposure I saw to him in the open practice highlights that I saw online. But he looked really good in a number of different areas, whether that was rushing the passer. There was a play where Jordan Mailata was going up to block him at the second level, and he absolutely stunned and knocked Jordan Mailata back to get in position to stop a run. It was an RPO, so the ball got thrown, but the front seven is still carrying out the run fake, and they're still having to play the run. But there were some plays that kind of got overlooked. No one was really talking about from the open practice that I thought he looked really, really good. And when you look at Fangio's constant praise of him as well, I think it's just clear that they view Bond as the guy that is probably their LB1 at the moment. So I don't think he's going to play a whole lot. I don't expect Devin White to play that much either. I think the jury is still out. I think there's some things that you like out of Devin White in terms of his athleticism, his coverage, covering running backs out of the backfield, being able to cover space, when he needs to drop back into zone coverage. All that stuff's great, but I thought, last year he was a little soft against the run. There was a play in the open camp practice where Cam Jurgens really got into his pads and drove him back 6 or 7 yards. Those are the things that I'm more worried about, is how physical he is against the run. Having said that, I think White is probably running away with this, with the starting job as well, especially when you see that it's been like 10 or 11 practices in a row where Bond and White have been the first team linebackers. What I'm paying attention most to, how much playing time does Nakobe Dean get? Because I think that's really going to tell us his position and his standing in this linebacker room. I do expect him to get a significant amount of playing time because I don't think Fangio and this defense overall is sold on him. Now, camp reports are that he looks good against the run and as a blitzer. And when we went through our linebacker review, we noted that about Dean, that against the run, he's a very good linebacker, especially, being able to play behind guys like Jordan Davis that can really clog up some blockers. He's really quick in diagnosing and getting to the spot and winning with his processing ability. But it's his ability in coverage that I think is his kryptonite, and it's been that way for the past couple of years. So to me, it's going to be hard for Dean to overtake Bond or White. And I think for that reason, you're going to see Dean having to play a lot of snaps and really earn his position. And he'll have to show that he is better than Trotter at this point in time. Now, I think Trotter is going to play a lot too, but I think he's similar to Nakobe in that he's great working downhill in the run game and as a blitzer, but I think he's suspect in coverage. You kind of got two of the same players in my view. So we'll see. Maybe Trotter can step up and show that he's better in coverage and moving backwards and moving in space than Nakobe is, showing that he's a little bit more fluid. We'll have to see how that plays out on the NFL field. I do think Ben Van Sumeren is a dark horse to get more playing time, and I'm really going to be honing in on BVS because he just has an athletic ability that Dean and Trotter cannot touch. And if there's anyone that's going to push for the linebacker 3 or potentially starting at linebacker over Devin White, I think it can be Ben Van Sumeren because he can be a more well-rounded player at the position. He doesn't display the same instincts as Dean or Trotter, especially when it comes to the run game, or he didn't in his rookie year. How has that developed over the past year? When he sees a hole and he plays with confidence, he gets downhill quickly, faster than Dean and Trotter can. But if you're not able to recognize and understand where you need to be at and how the offense is trying to attack you, that can really slow you down, and all that athletic ability in the world doesn't mean anything. But being able to cover running backs in space, being able to run with faster players down the field, I think Ben's got a much better ability to do that. And I think for that reason, he's a guy that I think can come in and potentially jump either Trotter or Dean. But that remains to be seen because he hasn't been given any linebacker, or he hasn't been given any run with the first team yet, whereas Jeremiah Trotter has already. So interested to see how linebacker position plays out. Moving on to cornerbacks, I'm very excited to get our first look at Quinyon Mitchell in the NFL and Isaiah Rodgers wearing midnight green. But I'm curious as how the playing time is going to work out. I don't know if either one of those guys are going to play a lot of snaps. Same with Keely Ringo as well. I know they're looking to see who's going to be the starter opposite side of Slay or potentially overtake Slay for a job. And trying to figure out who's going to be the starter at nickel as well. But I think it's quite obvious that we know who are going to be the players for the team in terms of guys that have a legitimate shot to get playing time. I don't know how much they want to risk injury to any of those three guys that I mentioned in Mitchell, Rodgers, and Ringo. I think they kind of have an idea, especially Rodgers is starting to pull away, getting more first-team reps than Ringo. I think they're getting a good enough idea of who their best players are at the position that I don't think they're looking at the preseason games necessarily as an indication of who's going to take jobs. I think that's going to come much more. I think that's going to come down to the training camp practices and their joint practice that they're going to have with the Patriots next week. I think more importantly, what we're going to see is playing time from the back end of the depth chart. There are a lot of guys on the back end of the roster that are fighting for spots on the team, such as Eli Ricks, Josh Jobe, Zach McPherson, Tyler Hall, and Sean Stevens. They're probably going to be the ones that get the vast majority of the playing time. Those are going to be the guys that I'm paying attention to the most, just because I want to see who is going to be potentially making the back end of the roster. Do any of these guys stand out enough to be potential trade bait for someone else so that we can maybe get another receiver back to fill out a spot there, or potential safety, as we're going to get to in a second. So paying attention to who stands out. Does Eli Ricks come back and show that he's especially when he gets playing time outside? Is he going to show that he is a guy that's worth keeping on the roster? Can Job do enough outside of being a special teams player to make this roster? How does McPherson look coming back from a torn Achilles that seems to be a death blow to most corners, especially guys that haven't earned much playing time through the first 3 years of their NFL career? Tyler Hall, can he make an impact to show that he should be the cornerback 2 and the slot? Sean Stevens, intriguing young prospect. He's had a couple of interceptions in camp. Can he show that he's a better playmaker than anyone we just discussed? So who steps up at corner? And then finally, moving on to safety. Does Reed Blankenship even play? I hope not, especially when you consider the injuries to CJ and Sidney Brown. Those are the 3 guys that you really expect to take significant snaps at safety this year. If they're already down with injuries to 2 of those players, there's no need to risk putting out Reed Blankenship and having potentially all 3 of your starting your safeties that you expect to get the most playing time injured before the first game. I don't think it's worth even putting him out there. So that leads us to the rest of the safeties. How much does Maddox play? How much does James Bradbury play? Is Maddox going to rotate in the slot some during this game, or is he going to be taking the majority of his snaps at safety? I'm projecting safety just because there's not a whole lot of safeties on the team that can even suit up to play right now. So I expect to see a decent amount of playing time out of Maddox. But I do expect to see James Bradbury play extensively at safety because, number one, if he's going to make the team as a safety, he needs reps at safety. He needs to get live game action at a new position. But also, in addition to that, he could be putting out good tape for a potential trade down the line. Now, I am starting to be of the belief that James Bradbury is going to make the roster, especially when you look at the contract implications and look at the Eagles' cap space going into next year. It's a very complicated roster, it's a very complicated contract. It's not as easy as just cutting the guy and think that you can move on. If they do cut him, they're going to be taking a $7-ish million cap hit on him next year. And if you look at Spot Rec, I think they currently have the Eagles at $10 million in cap space. Now, there's some other moves that could happen in that time span, such as rolling over cap space from this year to next year. But who knows how much cap space we're going to have at the end of this year, especially knowing that we are trying to load up the roster to compete for a Super Bowl. But, how does Bradbury look at safety, his first reps out? And really, I'm not so much concerned about the coverage aspect. More so, how does he look coming up against the run, playing physical when he does need a tackle? Is he able to fill that role for the defense? But I think this is a big opportunity for 2 of their backup safeties, and I do expect these guys to get a lot of playing time just because there's not a lot of bodies at the position right now. Tristan McCollum and Andre Sam should get a lot of playing time. McCollum, to me, is an intriguing player. He's pretty athletic for the position. He got some playing time in the final game of 2023 against the Giants, and he didn't look out of place. So can he push for a safety spot considering the depth that the Eagles have at the position and the Eagles' lack of free agent activity? They've pretty much let all the veteran free agents go to other teams, or especially with Justin Simmons, he's now had a visit with the Saints recently. The Eagles didn't really make any push to sign any additional safeties at that position. So does that signal that they have some faith in some of their deeper roster guys, such as McCollum and such as Andre Sam? The preseason game is going to be a great opportunity for us as fans to see what the team as a whole might be seeing on the back end. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to coming up in this preseason game, and we will come back with a film review of the preseason game to see who stood out for us, kind of recapping all these players that we talked about, seeing what surprised us, what didn't, and continuing on our journey to the beginning of the 2024 regular season. So, as always, make sure to like, subscribe, share the podcast so we can continue growing. And until next time, go Birds.